The spaceport city of Dravox 9 was cold that night. Sharp wind blew through the narrow metal alleys, and the artificial lights flickered as if even they were shivering. It was a place where no one gave free help. Survival came first. Kindness was weakness. A human named Reid walked slowly through the night market, his hands deep in his worn-out jacket. He had only 1 credit left in his account. He had lost his last job 2 weeks ago and hadn't eaten anything for a day. His stomach growled as he passed food stalls filled with spicy alien soups and roasted meat. Reid stopped in front of one vendor selling fried insect skewers. He could buy one and fill his belly, just for tonight. But then, he heard something. Sound. A soft whimper from the shadows behind a trash container. Reid turned, curious. Most people would ignore it, but not him. He followed the sound around the corner and saw something that made his heart freeze. A young alien woman, thin and shaking, sat curled up on the ground. Her skin was light blue and her long silver hair was messy and dirty. In her arms she held 2 small alien children, both no older than 6. They looked hungry, cold, and weak. The little girl was crying, but the mother tried to hush her with soft kisses and gentle hums. Reid stepped closer. The woman noticed him and tensed. But she didn't beg. She didn't ask for money. She just held her children tighter. The woman looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, just let them be. Don't hurt us." Reid knelt down slowly. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "Are you okay?" She shook her head. "We haven't eaten in days. My mate died in the last war. No family will take us. I tried to work, but they won't hire a widow with children." Reid's eyes burned. He knew this city. Aliens without family, especially widows, were often ignored, or worse. She wasn't lying. He looked at his credit chip again. Just 1. Enough for a hot meal. Enough for him to last another day. But then he looked at the shivering kids, wrapped in nothing but thin rags. The little boy coughed. The girl cried again. Reid stood and walked back to the market. He went straight past the food stalls and stopped at a small stall selling old blankets. The vendor, a grumpy alien with 4 eyes, laughed when he saw Reid's torn clothes. "1 credit, that's it," Reid said, pointing at the thickest, warmest blanket on the rack. The vendor looked at him like he was crazy. "You sure? You can get food with that, you look half dead." Reid nodded. "I want the blanket." The vendor shrugged and handed it over. "Your funeral, human." Reid took the blanket and walked back to the alley. The alien woman stared in surprise as he knelt and gently wrapped the blanket around her and her children. She gasped. Why would you do this?" Reid smiled a little. "Because no one else did." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she looked at him not with fear, but with something like hope. Reid sat beside them. The cold bit into his bones, but he didn't care. The children cuddled into their mother, their small bodies warming under the blanket. Within minutes, the little girl was asleep, her hand clutching her brother's. The alien woman looked at Reid. "What's your name?" "Reid." "I'm Thyra," she whispered. "Thank you." "Reid." He nodded and leaned back against the metal wall. His stomach still growled, but something else filled his chest, something warm. He had no money, no job, no plan. But that night he felt richer than he had in months. As the stars blinked above Dravox 9, Reid fell asleep next to the alien widow and her children, not as a stranger, but as a silent guardian. He didn't know it yet, but this small act of kindness would change his future forever. 3 nights had passed since Reid gave away his last credit. He had slept behind a trash compactor, his back bruised from cold metal and his stomach empty. Hunger whispered in his ears like a ghost, and every step he took felt heavier than the last. He didn't regret it, not even once. But something inside him whispered, maybe they forgot. Maybe she's gone forever. On the 4th night, while Reid was sitting near the maintenance bay trying to warm his hands over a leaking steam vent, he suddenly heard footsteps, Soft ones. Not heavy like soldiers, not loud like merchants, gentle, careful. He turned around slowly. There she stood, Thyra, but not the same. She was clean now. Her silver hair was brushed and braided. Her alien robes were old but neatly stitched. And in her hands, the same blanket he had given her. Wrapped in that blanket were hot food containers and a bottle of warm juice. Behind her stood the two children. The boy smiled shyly. The girl ran forward and handed Reid a flower. Ugly and half dead, but picked with love. Reid stared, too shocked to speak. "You gave us warmth," Thyra said quietly, kneeling down. "Now we give it back." Reid swallowed hard. His pride told him to say no, but his body shook as the smell of warm food reached his nose. He hadn't eaten in days. He reached out, and Thyra placed the containers in his hands. The food wasn't much. Some soft bread, a boiled root, a small slice of dried meat. But to Reid, it tasted better than any king's feast. The juice burned his throat as it went down, warm and sweet. Thyra watched him silently. Then she said something unexpected. "We've been looking for you every night." Reid blinked. "Why?" She smiled sadly. "Because we wanted to see your face again. I had forgotten what safety felt like, Reid. You reminded me." The kids sat beside him, one on each side. The boy leaned against his arm. Reid's heart ached, but it was a strange, healing ache. Thyra sat across from him, her fingers folding the edges of the blanket. "We found a small storeroom near the old docks, abandoned but clean. The children can sleep safely there." Reid nodded. "That's good, I'm happy you're safe." She paused, then asked, "Why did you do it, Reid? Why give your last credit for strangers like us?" He thought for a moment. "Because I was tired of walking past pain and pretending it wasn't mine." Silence followed his words. Thyra looked down at the ground. Then she stood and held out her hand. "Come with us. You don't have to sleep in alleys anymore." Reid shook his head. "You barely have space, you've already done enough." But she stepped closer. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. "With you near, the children sleep easier. I sleep easier." That night, Reid followed them to their small hidden shelter. It was just a one-room storeroom with a cracked roof and dusty floor, but inside there was a blanket on the ground, clean clothes folded in a box, and the smell of cooked root still hanging in the air. The children lay down and curled into each other. Thyra sat next to Reid, watching them. "You're not just the man who saved us," she said softly. Reid raised an eyebrow. "Then what am I?" She smiled with a warmth he hadn't seen in anyone's eyes for years. "You're the reason I believe again." Reid didn't answer. He didn't know how. His throat was too tight. But as he lay beside them, warm, full, and finally at peace, he knew something had changed. He wasn't alone anymore, and neither was she. But somewhere outside, in the shadowy corners of the alien city, someone else had noticed their bond forming, and not everyone liked it. Reid woke up to a strange sound, laughter, not cruel or mocking, but soft, playful laughter. It was coming from the corner of the dusty storeroom. He sat up slowly. The children were giggling as they played with an old, broken data pad. Thyra had somehow turned it into a toy. She looked up and smiled when she saw Reid awake. "You slept? Like a stone," she whispered, her voice warm like morning light. Reid rubbed his eyes. "Been a while since I slept under a roof." She handed him a warm cup of root brew. "Then get used to it." He took it, their fingers touching for the briefest moment. Something passed between them in that touch. A flicker. A warmth deeper than the brew in his hands. That afternoon, Reid helped fix a crack in the wall while Thyra took the kids to find food. As he worked, he noticed a strange figure standing across the alley, watching. It was a tall alien male, his skin gray-blue, and his robes expensive. His eyes burned like cold fire. He didn't speak, just stared. Reid stood still, heart thudding. The man finally turned and walked away without a word. Reid shook off the unease and went back inside. But that night, Thyra returned looking pale. Reid knew something was wrong the moment she stepped in. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated, then finally sat beside him and whispered, "That male, the one watching you today, his name is Vorken. He was once promised to me, before the war." Reid frowned. "And now?" "He was never kind. My mate was chosen over him. When my husband died, Vorken came again, but I said no. I chose safety for my children, not power." Reid clenched his fists. "And now he's watching because you're with me?" Thyra nodded slowly. "He thinks I've insulted him, shamed him. But I did nothing wrong." Reid looked at her. Really looked at her. She was scared. Not for herself, but for her children. He stood. "I'll talk to him," but she grabbed his arm, holding tight. "No, he doesn't fight with fists. He uses whispers, lies. He'll twist everything." "Then what do we do?" Reid asked. Thyra looked down. Her voice cracked. "We hide. We survive." That night, the air was thick with silence. The children were asleep. Thyra sat beside Reid, her body close, her voice low. "You risked everything for us. I don't understand why." Reid looked at her, his voice raw. "I didn't do it to win anything. I did it because it was right." She turned to him, eyes shining. "Reid, if I asked you something bold, something strange, would you say no?" He raised an eyebrow. "Try me." She held up a thin metal tag, glowing faintly. It was a bond symbol, a custom of her people. Not legal marriage, not forever, but a sign of trust, protection, and shared space. "If you wear this, no one can remove you from our side. Not even Vorken." Reid looked at it. A simple gesture, but it meant everything in her world. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I'd rather be shamed with a good man than protected by a monster." He took the tag and pressed it to his chest. It glowed softly, locking into his shirt. For the first time, Thyra leaned her head on his shoulder. No more words, just closeness. But outside their small shelter, Vorken watched from the shadows. His hands were clenched. His lips curled into a snarl. "She marked the human?" he whispered to himself. "Then I'll mark them all. With fire." The night air in Dravox 9 was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Inside the old storeroom, Reid slept lightly, his arm gently draped across the two sleeping alien children. Thyra sat near the doorway, eyes half closed, holding a small piece of scrap, metal she had shaped into a charm. She was trying to stay awake. Something didn't feel right, and then she smelled it. Smoke. It was faint at first, but rising fast. She rushed outside. Her eyes widened. Flames. The corner of the building was on fire. Old wires sparked like angry snakes. A burning scent filled the air as oily trash caught the fire and helped it grow. She screamed, "Reid!" "The fire!" Reid jumped up instantly, grabbing the kids in his arms. One child began coughing, the other cried. The smoke was thick already. "We need to get out. Now!" he yelled. Thyra tried to open the front panel door, but the fire had melted, part of it shut. The exit was blocked. "The back!" Reid shouted. They ran through the narrow passage, heat licking at their heels. Flames chased them like monsters in the dark. Reid kicked open the back grate, coughing as black smoke filled his lungs. He pushed the children out first. Thyra followed. The building behind them collapsed in fire. They stood in the alley, choking and gasping. People stared but didn't move. No one came to help. Just whispers. "That's the widow and her human. Someone must have set that fire. They brought trouble." Thyra held her children tight, trembling, but Reid's eyes scanned the crowd until they stopped on a figure at the end of the street. Vorken. His arms were crossed, his face calm, cold. His eyes locked with Reid's. He did this. Reid stepped forward, fury rising, but Vorkin just turned and walked away. Hours later, they sat by the river dock. The children had fallen asleep again, wrapped in borrowed cloth. Their home, their safety, was gone. Thyra was quiet. "I told you he wouldn't stop," she whispered. Reid stared at the dark water. "No more hiding." She looked at him, confused. "We're going to speak to the station's peacekeepers. No one listens to widows, especially not one bonded to a human." Reid turned to her, his voice steady. "Then I'll make them listen." At dawn, Reid stood before a council tent made of silver fabric and blue crystal. It belonged to the local peacekeepers, guardians of neutral law. Thyra followed reluctantly, carrying her daughter. Inside, alien officers raised their brows. "What brings you here, human?" Reid spoke clearly. "We were attacked. Our shelter was burned. Children almost died." "Do you have proof?" Reid stepped closer. "Ask around. Everyone saw the fire, and they saw who was watching before it started." "Who?" "Vorkin." The officers glanced at each other. "That male is connected, wealthy, respected." Thyra stepped forward, her voice shook. "He wasn't always respected. Ask the females from his past. He hides his cruelty behind money." The officers were silent. Then one said, "We'll investigate." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a dismissal either. That night, Reid and Thyra sat behind the city's power plant, cold and tired. They had no blanket this time, just each other. Reid opened his shirt and removed the bond tag, looking at it. "I meant what I said when I took this," he said. "But if you want to end it now, after all this, I'll understand." She looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she leaned forward and placed her forehead against his. Her hand reached out and pulled the bond tag from his fingers and pinned it back to his chest. "Where I go," she said softly. "You go," he exhaled, relief and affection filling his chest. Then she added, "And one day, he will pay, but not with fire, with truth." The fire had stolen their home. The system had ignored their cries. But hope whispered in the children's voices as Reid helped Thyra carry their sleeping son. The little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered. "What about Aunt Vexa?" Thyra froze mid-step. Reid looked at her. "Who's Vexa?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stared into the distance as if remembering another lifetime. Then she finally spoke. "She was my friend, my protector. When I was young and foolish, she was a warrior. She saved me, once long ago." Reid nodded. "So we ask her for help." But Thyra's voice dropped. "She lives in the Ashlands now, exiled, hunted. The law won't go near her, and she doesn't forgive easily." Reid met her gaze. "We don't need forgiveness. We need justice." The next morning, they traveled on foot through the outskirts of Drevox 9. The city slowly gave way to broken roads and blackened soil. The Ashlands were where the city dumped its failures, old machines, war wreckage, toxic winds. No one lived, there by choice. As they walked, scavengers watched them from afar. Feral drones buzzed overhead, and in the distance, dark smoke spiraled from dead factories. The children coughed, and Reid carried them one at a time. Thyra moved quietly, but her eyes were alert. Her body remembered how to walk in danger. She had not always been soft. Once she had been fierce. By sunset, they reached a jagged hill of rusted metal and rock. There, in the middle of it, stood a tower made from salvaged ship parts. As they approached, a mechanical voice spoke from an unseen speaker. "Turn back, strangers." Thyra stepped forward. "Vexa, it's me." Silence. Then a low, powerful voice came through. "Thyra?" The ground rumbled. A large metal door creaked open, and from the shadow stepped a tall alien woman clad in armor pieced together from old warsuits. Her eyes were golden, her body scarred, and her long dreadlocked hair swayed like ropes. Reid instinctively stepped in front of the children. But Thyra walked forward, no fear in her steps. Vexa's eyes softened as she looked at her old friend. I thought you were dead. I almost was, Thyra replied. Then a human gave me a blanket. Vexa raised an eyebrow. A blanket? Thyra smiled faintly. And his last credit. Vexa looked at Reid for the first time. You gave your last coin to her? Reid shrugged. She needed it more. Vexa stared a moment longer, then gave a slow nod of respect. Come inside. Inside the tower, they shared their story. About Vorken, the fire, the peacekeepers who refused to act. Vexa paced the room. I always knew Vorken would become a monster. But now he's worse. He hides behind clean robes and smooth lies. Reid leaned forward. Can we expose him? Vexa stopped pacing. Yes, but not through words. He uses shadows, so we drag him into light. She pulled a small sphere from her belt, a war record orb. During the last war, he broke orders. Killed civilians, I recorded it, but no one cared. He paid them all off. Reid's eyes narrowed. Do you still have the proof? Vexa smirked. Of course, Thyra's voice trembled. Then why? Didn't you use it? Vexa looked at her old friend, pain flashing across her face. Because I had no reason to fight anymore until now. She turned to Reid. You're different. I've seen men save women with guns. But a man who saves with kindness? That's rare. She reached under the table and placed the orb in Reid's hand. Take this to the open court broadcast. The truth will burn brighter than any fire he sets. That night, as they lay in the tower's upper chamber, Thyra leaned close to Reid. You didn't have to come this far. I know, Reid said. But you were worth walking for. She kissed his cheek. Then walk with me to the end. The Ashland's wind howled like a warning. But still, Reid, Thyra, the children and Vexa moved toward the city. Vexa rode a repurposed war bike, its thrusters sputtering from age but still fast. Reid held the children close on the back. Thyra sat beside him, clutching the evidence orb in her hand like it was their last hope. The city of Dravox 9 was just 2 hours away. They didn't know they were being watched. Inside a dark, moving skimmer high above the ground, Vorken stood with his arms behind his back, staring through the glass. He had heard the whispers. His spies had told him, the widow found the warrior. They're coming to the court. They have something. Vorken's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. Then I will erase them before the world hears them. He turned to his private guards, 5 elite bounty hunters dressed in black armor, faces hidden behind metal masks. Kill the warrior. Burn the evidence. Make the human beg. They nodded and vanished into the storm. Reid could feel it before it happened. Cold in his bones, the silence of birds fleeing, the way the wind shifted suddenly. Stop the bike, he yelled. Vexa slammed the brake. Dust flew everywhere. Then, a flash of light, a shot. It missed them by inches. Vexa growled. Ambush! From the ridge above, the bounty hunters dropped down. Plasma blades hummed to life. One aimed straight at the children. Reid didn't think. He leapt off the bike, shielding the children with his own body. A blade slashed down, blocked by Vexa's war spear. The warrior moved like a storm. One hunter went flying. Thyra dragged the children behind a metal crate. She turned to Reid, her voice sharp. Take the orb. Get to the court, no matter what. What about you? I'll buy you time. Reid clutched the orb and ran. Behind him, metal clashed. Vexa let out a battle cry and 2 attackers screamed. A third chased Reid through the scrapyard ruins, firing stun blasts. Reid ducked, rolled, kept running. He reached the city border checkpoint. Civilians watched. Peacekeepers moved in slow motion. He jumped onto a vendor cart and shouted, I have evidence. I need to speak to the court. Now! A guard tried to stop him, but before he could, Vexa's voice roared from behind. Let him pass. She had arrived, bloodied but alive, one eye swollen. Her spear broken in half, but her spirit unbroken. The guard stepped back. Inside the open broadcast court, Lights turned on. Cameras floated above. Holograms of officials filled the circle. Vorkin was already there, dressed in golden robes, smiling. Like a saint, he raised his hands. This human brings lies. A widow's shame. A warrior's betrayal. He turned to the crowd. They burned their own shelter to gain sympathy. They hate our unity. Reid stepped forward. No. We brought the truth. He raised the orb high. It activated. A bright light filled the air. A projection appeared. Vorkin, years ago, ordering a unit to attack unarmed civilians, children, families. Gasps filled the room. Vorkin's smile shattered. That's fake. Edited. Lies. Vexa limped into the circle. Her voice cut through. The air like steel. I was there. I recorded it. I swore to stay silent, but no more. Reid added. He tried to kill us to hide this. He almost killed these children again. The court fell into chaos. Peacekeepers stepped forward. Vorkin, you are under arrest. As the guards cuffed the furious noble, he screamed at Thyra, You were mine. You were meant to be mine. She stepped forward, calm but firm. I was never yours. I was always my own. Then she reached for Reid's hand and held it tight. In choosing him, I found something you'll never have. Love. That night, a warm breeze passed through the city. In a new safe shelter provided by the council, Reid watched the children sleep peacefully. Thyra stood behind him, wrapping her arms around his chest. I didn't know love could be this quiet, she whispered. Reid smiled. It starts loud, but then it stays in the silence. 1 week later, the city of Dravox 9 was quieter. Now, the sky was clear above the metal towers and the streets hummed with a gentler energy. No more whispers of scandal. No more threats hiding in the dark. Just the sound of markets reopening, children laughing, and something rare, peace. Reid stood by the window of their new home, a clean, warm room provided by the High Council as part of their Justice Act. It had real walls, soft light panels, and more importantly, a locked door no one could kick open. The smell of food drifted from the kitchen corner. A small pot of hot spiced root stew simmered quietly. Behind him, the two alien children, Lyra and Joran, played with small carved toys. They laughed without fear, without hunger, without cold. Thyra was humming softly as she stirred the stew, her long silver hair tied back with a blue ribbon. Her skin, once pale from sickness and sadness, now glowed with life. And Reid, he looked content. But under his calm expression was a question, one he'd been holding in his heart. That night they ate together around a round table. It was simple food, but filled with warmth and care. Lyra asked if she could sleep with her toy on her pillow. Joran said he wanted to grow up and be like Reid, a protector who gives blankets. Thyra smiled gently at that, but her eyes met Reid's for a long, silent moment. Later, after the children had fallen asleep, Thyra stepped outside onto the balcony. The stars above were bright tonight. Reid followed her. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then she said, When I was a girl, I used to dream of a bondmate who would bring me gold and silk. Reid chuckled softly. Sorry, I only had a blanket. She turned to him, her face serious. And yet that blanket was more powerful than gold. It saved us. It told me there was still goodness in the universe. He looked at her, really looked. You saved me too. I didn't know it until now, but I was empty before I met you. Just drifting. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You filled the spaces in me that no one else even saw. She stepped closer, placing her hand on his chest, right over where he wore the bond tag she had once given him. I don't want to call you protector anymore, she said. Reid raised an eyebrow. Then what would you call me? Thyra's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed strong. Mate, if you'll have us. The wind held its breath. For 1 second, time froze. Then Reid cupped her face gently and whispered, I already do. She kissed him under the stars, not with urgency, but with meaning. A kiss that spoke of long nights survived, of fire escaped, of laughter returned, of love earned. A month later. The ceremony was simple. Not many guests. Just a few friends, some council members, and one fierce alien warrior named Vexa, standing guard at the door like a protective statue. Reid wore simple gray robes. Thyra wore white, with blue bands on her arms that shimmered softly with each movement. The bond was sealed with light, not words. A soft beam scanned their tags and etched their names together in the planetary records. No one spoke when the scan finished, because suddenly Lyra ran forward, hugging Reid's leg. "You're my real father now, right?" she asked. Reid knelt and hugged her back. "I always was." That night, their new home glowed with soft music, gentle laughter, and warm candlelight. Vexa, ever the silent guest, gave Reid a sharpened knife forged from wreckage steel. "It's tradition," she said with a smirk. "Every protector needs one." The children danced around the room. Thyra sat curled beside Reid, her head resting on his shoulder. "I used to be afraid every day," she said softly. "Now I wake up and feel safe." Reid smiled, brushing her hair aside. "I used to be alone every day. Now I wake up and feel like I belong." 1 year later, Reid stood behind a stall in the busy city square. A small wooden sign hung above him. Reid and Thyra's Warmth Co. Blankets, shelter kits, hope. They gave away as much as they sold. Refugees, orphans, cold widows, lonely travelers. They came here now, not to be forgotten, but to be seen. Reid handed a soft green blanket to a shivering old alien and said the same words he always did. "I once gave my last credit for a blanket like this. Best decision I ever made." Thyra watched from the corner with pride in her eyes. Lyra and Joran ran around the stall, handing out smiles and sweet root candies, and high above them, on a tall building wall, was a new mural. It showed a simple image, a human kneeling, offering a blanket to an alien mother holding her children. Below it read, "Kindness is never small. Sometimes it saves galaxies." That night, as Reid walked home with Thyra's hand in his, he looked up at the stars again. So much had changed. And yet, it had all started with just one credit. One cold night. One soft blanket. One moment of choosing love over survival. And now, he had warmth. Not just around him, but within him.